welcome to this afternoon's session. I hope you all had a good lunch. Okay, so now my task is to keep you awake. We call this the graveyard shift for a reason. So obviously today I'm going to talk a bit about user experience, but user experience being such a broad field, I'm not going to touch much on interaction design or deliverables like personas or wireframes. But later on at 4 o'clock, I'm going to run on a conference session. So if you've got questions on those things, or anything in this sort for that matter, let's come hang out and we can just chat or, and sort of get that out of our system if you like. Mostly today I want to discuss user experience tools in terms of creating a product. So what happens when you come from an idea to building the actual thing. And just the tools that I've come across and the tools that I've used in my own journeys, and I want to share this with you today. So I'm Steph, or my Twitter name is @Sniffles. Feel free to tweet me your questions, your complaints, your remarks, and the hashtag for today is PHP UK 2012. Okay. I apologize firstly for the strange accent that might change in the course of the next 45 minutes because I'm living in my 4th island right now, and it kind of depends whether I've listened to the BBC just before or listened to someone from a different country, and I tend to emulate a different accent. So please bear with me. And also, if it so happens that I'm speaking way too fast all of a sudden because I get terribly excited, please slow me down and I'll try and rectify and explain what I'm saying. I used to have a computer science degree. I probably technically still have it. This is also why I know all the code. It is a competition we had amongst peers once upon a time to figure out whether we could write this particular algorithm in the shortest number of characters possible. I think I lost by 1 character. But mostly, my journey from computer science to user experience was I realized that we could put in our best efforts to build the best thing, but if it doesn't work for the people who are using them, then it's kind of, it doesn't actually technically work. And basically that's where I am today with user experience. And now I want to know about you. So is it safe to presume that everyone here is or has been a developer? Yes? Okay, so who's not a developer in this room? We have a few. Thank you. And so what are you if you're not a developer? Can I ask? What do you do if you're not developing today?
Online design.
A design?
Online design.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Online design.
Online design? And the person up the back?
Commercial.
Commercial.
Yeah.
And managing software projects. Excellent. So I know there are probably also developers who are designers in this room. Can you raise your hands? If you dare admit in this hall that you're a designer. Okay, excellent. Now, we have team managers, right? You've got the guy at the back. And is any other team managers in this room?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Now, who has raised their hands more than once? It's actually a few. Yeah. There's a few of us who do different things. It's great. So now, the more important questions I have, which of you are working on a startup or thinking of starting one? It's about a third. Sort of like little clear ones. Again, I'm not sure yet, I've got an idea. Also, who have actually used user research or user experience tools in your work so far? Okay, fair few. Right, you might actually go to sleep. This is $1 million question, and if you want to start a fight in a room full of designers, this is what you would ask them. Because apparently a room full of designers cannot agree on what user experience is because it's such a broad topic. And I have a theory that perhaps we're asking the wrong question. And really, it might be more effective for us to ask what the outcome is of the user experience process. And so the question I challenge us to ask is, what actually makes a unique, great product? Because at the end of the day, a process is just a process, but if a process doesn't achieve what you're really setting out to do, it might not actually be effective. So, this diagram has been quoted in numerous sources, so much so that I don't actually know where the original one is. Has anyone seen this before in your journeys? Okay, a couple maybe? Yeah, 1 or 2. The idea behind this Venn diagram, as Venn diagrams go, you can put anything in 3 circles and it means something. Technology supports business goals and user needs, and that is kind of a basic definition of what we mean by a digital product. However, I would argue that this doesn't allow you to create a unique product, because after you build a few applications, you almost realize that feature sets are more or less replicable. And it doesn't, you could have a competitor doing something pretty much the same as you, and it doesn't make what you're doing unique. So what makes things unique? I'm afraid I have to introduce a dirty word, and it's called brand. By brand, I don't mean a logo, I don't mean colors, I mean nature of voice, so like fun, exotic, or adventurous, or serious, reliable, and useful. Now, how important is this? And one sort of example that I'd point out is, imagine your banking application that you use today, so I imagine all of us here probably use online banking. If your banking application starts suddenly being exotic, adventurous, and fun, you'd be seriously worried, wouldn't you? We want our banking applications to have sort of adjectives like serious, reliable, and ultimately secure. And this is why brand is important when you are sort of designing a product. Now, don't feel bad that I took technology out of the circle, because the reason why I'm here today at PHP Conf is, oops, it's not working. So this is what you need to product. But the reason why I'm here today is, as technologists, as engineers, as developers, you are the ones who support all these things that make a great product, and your role in determining what the outcome of a product is so, so important that we can't really just overlook it, and that's why I'm here today. And that's also to say that you should listen to me for the next 20 minutes. Which of you were at June's session yesterday on creative coding? Okay, fair for you. Okay. Now, all of a sudden. June actually touched on this really briefly in sort of, if you sort of squint a little bit, you can see similarities. But this is a known sort of generalized process for how you come up from an idea into execution. Now, this particular infographic was created by Ronald Brown, and it was published on Mashable sort of around early September last year. And basically, I'm sorry about the colors, it's obviously not made for digital screen, and so it should be easier on your eyes. These 9 steps more or less sort of figure out where we go from an idea, a concept, to execution. I'm just going to walk you through it, mostly because what we're going to be spending the rest of, actually the most of the time today, is looking at where the user experience tools fit in. So, oops, let's try that again. Imagine identify. Identify here signifies what problem you're trying to solve, like identify which particular problem you're trying to solve. So imagine, let's say you decide that you want to create a new ebook reader. Do you create an app, or do you go all out and create a device? So let's say you decide that's the thing that you want to solve because you believe that there is a room for building a better e-reader. And the gather step will mean that you go out and actually learn about the industry. Now, it sounds quite simple. You think, oh, maybe I'll just look at what other competitors are doing. What's Amazon doing? What's Kobo doing? Or what other things are doing. But you probably also want to be looking at how many people are actually reading digital books, whether they would buy or whether they tend to just download the free Gutenberg stuff. So all that kind of stuff, all that kind of research is what we mean by gather. Examine is obviously when you've got everything that you think you ought to find out laid in front of you, and then you get into that special phase, which is a bit of a mystery. It's called incubate, and I think that you may have recalled this from June's slides yesterday. Now, incubate sounds kind of strange because it sounds like you should sit on an idea and wait for it to hatch. In some ways, it's true, but user experience tools do help here in sort of generating new ideas. And so, we'll go through, sit on it, eventually something hatches, and mysteriously at this point, we retrieve the idea and differentiate. By differentiating means that we decide how we're going to differ from our competitors. And then there's sort of traditional project management cycle stuff where you plan your agile scrum cycles, and that stuff start kicking in when you plan your project and when you actually go and build and you track. Now, that's just in the gist. But let's just go. Let's summarize this very quickly. So you find the problem you want to solve. You spend a little while shaping the problem you're trying to solve. And then you decide what is it that you want to do. You implement it and you track. Sounds straightforward, right? More or less. However, if you look at this very, very carefully, these steps can be divided into two sort of spaces. And the first 4 steps, we are exploring the problem space, and the rest of it is solution space. Now, if you're an engineer, most of us tend to end up in this area. And when you're looking at, say, creating sort of a platform for something or other, most of us would dive straight here and not spend enough time in the problem space. So for the rest of this session, I'm going to spend a lot of time in the problem space and giving us some tools on how to pragmatically explore the stuff in this first area. And so this is a quote from the book called The Myths of Innovation by Scott Birkin. I want to know, anyone has heard of this book? No one. Oh, good.
I saw it at the O'Reilly stand. I picked it up and looked at it and thought, that looks interesting.
You saw it at the O'Reilly stand and you thought it looks interesting. So basically, if you are going to work on a startup, or if you think you're ever going to work on a startup, or even if you don't, please pick up this book. I did a startup, and by the time it pivoted and I left the project, I found this book, and I wished like hell that I actually read it beforehand. And so Scott says, the great mistake is leaping from facts to solution, skipping over the play and exploration at the heart of finding new ideas. And basically what he's trying to say is we spend so much time thinking that we've got the facts now, off we go. But we don't actually spend time really thinking about the problem we're trying to solve. And so it becomes very, very easy to solve the wrong problem. Now, back to our problem sort of space that I identified earlier. The user experience tools that you can use are really helpful in sort of these first few phases. So problem naming and framing, user market research, so plenty of tools there from user experience. And also some of them that you might already know, sort of sketching, prototyping, fits into sort of incubate and retrieve. I'm going to spend most of the time today on just this 2 because you could have me for the rest of the week if you want me to talk about the rest of them. And so let's talk now about what it means to have a well-defined problem. So problem well-defined is a problem half solved, says John Dewey, and he's not the guy who invented the Dewey Decimal System, which is what I thought when I first found this quote. He's just actually an American philosopher, so sorry to disappoint you there. A badly defined problem can result in Clippy. Does anyone not remember Clippy? Okay, so you're giggling, and you know why? It's because we thought, no, it was quite obvious, it took 10 years to kill Clippy. And I guess somebody thought that having a little talking clip was very helpful. It would help you decide that you're writing a letter and therefore set up the format for you. In actual fact, something like this is a bad replacement for just badly designed software in the first place. It does not address a usability problem. When I put these slides up, it bothered me that there will be an entire generation of people after us who has never met Clippy and therefore would not understand our pain. Okay, quiz time. Who invented the light bulb?
Edison.
Edison? Edison, 2? More? Edison?
It wasn't Edison.
Who was it? Sorry?
Edison commercialized it.
Brilliant. So who did invent the light bulb?
One?
You're too good. Okay, so the story goes, we think Edison because Edison commercialized the light bulb. Now, the problem with the idea of invention is, you've got to think about invention in terms of when it happens. Are you the first guy who came up with the idea? Are you the guy who made it work? Because that is no small feat to make it work. Or are you the guy who commercialized it? We remember Edison because he's the guy who commercialized it and figured out how. But amongst the names of the people who actually invented the light bulb include names like Joseph Swan, who we have no idea who he is, and Humphrey Davy. However, if you want to think as far back as who actually invented the light bulb, you can think like, a candle. Like, whoever thought of the idea of a candle, an isolated light that you can move around with? I mean, you can't do that with a light bulb today, but you can do it with a flashlight. So, is the person who invented the candle the person who invented the light bulb? Anyway, food for thought. Edison, however, the reason why we remember him is because he framed the problem correctly. Instead of figuring out, can I make the cheapest light bulb, can I make the light bulb that works best? He actually figured out the reason why, he actually figured out the problem he had to solve was how to get electricity to every house so that they would need a light bulb. And that's the impact of when you frame a problem correctly. Did I get the story right? Okay, 2 nods, good, thanks. So, back to Earth. What problem are we solving? What impact do you want to have? And how do you measure success? These are all difficult questions. Now, when you start thinking about what you want to build, it's probably a good idea to have some answers to these. And the other constraints tend to be because it's very rare that we work alone. What kinds of business constraints do we have? What organizational visions and goals do we have to take into account? So, I mean, all of us more or less, I imagine, work in a team, right? There's probably a couple of individuals here who are freelancers, and I'm a freelancer, but I also work in a team because I have to work with my client. And so how do we unpack this sort of thing? Because all these kinds of things have impact on what we can or cannot do. So here's a tool that is so traditional that we forget it. It's called conversation. And I know that sounds scary, but there are ways to make it a lot less painful by giving it some structure. So if you have to look up some tools, we call them stakeholder interviews, but stakeholders can just be your team, your boss, your boss's boss, your client. And so it really depends on, in that particular project context you're in, who you're working with. All good? Has anyone heard of the SPOT or the SWOT? So if I do this sort of thing, oh, okay, all right. For the benefit of the people who don't know what this tool is, it's a simple management and strategy tool that is probably somewhat underused. I still find it useful sometimes when you're at crisis point and trying to figure out where things are. And all it really is a list. Really simple: strengths, problems, opportunities, and threats. Now, you can actually sort of turn this upside down and have it work still. The only thing you have to care about is that your internal factors, that's internal to your team, are strengths and problems, and the things that are external, sort of economic impact, or the fact that we have flatlining growth in the UK, is a threat. Sorry, I did not mean to sound political in the talk. And so, the power is, so you get everyone around the table and you start listing these things. If you have sort of negative vibe going on in your team, you would find the problems list is usually about 3 times larger than the strengths list. But that's not a problem itself. What you can do is start actually convincing people that they think positively. Now, if you want to rewrite this problem as a strength, can we do it? And working the same way with threats and opportunities, converting them, rewriting them as opportunities. So it's a matter of a positive thinking exercise. Then you look at matching what strengths to your opportunities, and this become potential objectives. Now, I don't have an example here to show you, mostly because this is kind of complicated. And I would just say try it out and see once if it works for you or not, and if not, it doesn't matter at all. Back to that dirty word called brand. What are core values and what do you want to be when you grow up? When you create an application or a product, this is kind of important for a few reasons, and I can show you why a little later. If you have gone through a branding exercise, you should know what your core values are, and these are sort of like the adjectives I was saying earlier, plus a couple of things. There's a tool for reverse engineering a brand. So it could be your brand, or it could be the brand of the person you're working for. And this is kind of not very original in terms of a name. It's called the Rational Emotional Grid, and it looks like this. You label it rational emotional, doesn't it? Isn't that logical? This is an example from a project that I worked on, would have been almost over a year ago. Now, so the project we were working on it was a startup. It unfortunately closed down last year, so I can't actually show you what it looks like today, where it was an online gaming, social gaming, where you, basically everyone's encouraged to play missions so that they try new things, or they get a little bit outside the comfort zone and feel like they've achieved something every day. And so when I was working with this team, and they were saying we're not getting enough conversions, and it's like, okay, well, let's look at your homepage. Now, you've seen startup homepages, all of you, I'm sure. And you know what they usually have is like, these are the benefits for signing up. It's free, 1, 2, 3. Or you have these is how it works, 1, 2, 3. Now, if you stop and think about that for a moment, that is a particularly rational way of sorting information. Now, so we did this rational emotional exercise with the team and said, okay, how would you want people to describe you as a product? And so we came up with this list. Let me read it quickly to you because I know that at the back you probably can't read it so well. Fun, psychic, the system knows exactly what I'm looking for. It's motivating, it's entertaining, it's magical, it's encouraging, surprising, and it allows me to have a positive influence on people around me, and it allows me to inspire people around me. On the rational side, it has to be effective, or a facilitating site, and it indicates whether I'm making progress or not, sort of on the rational side. And by the time I'd done with this list, which probably took us not very long, like less than an hour or so, and then I said, okay, now look at your homepage. You've got benefits 1, 2, 3, and look at the list of words on the emotional side of the chart. Your product is an emotional product, and therefore your homepage probably should appeal to the emotional side of someone's personality in order to get more conversions. You make the change, conversions went up. Very, very, very simple. Now, this list of words is, when you do it for your own exercise, it actually has a further impact than just, say, your homepage design. It could impact things like your artistic direction, your content strategy, how you choose to describe yourself. It could also impact, let's say, when you grow to a particular extent, how customer support, how do your customer support people interact with the folks that that have sort of run you up and say, this is not working. This value system provides a sort of a cohesive experience of your product, and a simple exercise that doesn't take very long can get you that far. How are you doing so far? Are we not going too fast? I think we're all right. Okay. Normally about this stage I'll probably play a video of some funny cats and take a break, but let's just keep going. Competitors. Nobody really likes them, but they exist too, so that we would be on our toes more. Understanding competitors is actually quite tricky. It's not quite as straightforward as we think of in terms of feature sets. Like I said, you can't differentiate on feature sets. So understanding what competitors are doing and how we're different to them requires an analysis. And I actually haven't got a written up example of this tool because it really depends on the context you're in. But what I'm going to say is, look this up if it interests you, and you find probably quite a lot of material. What's important to understand is that competitive analysis cannot just be on feature sets, because like we've talked about right now, you want to look at their brand. How are they expressing themselves to their users? Are they the same users as your users that you want to target? What is their business model? Is it the same as yours? Or is it the same as what you think you want to do? What are their design strategies? And who's their user base? And then, finally, feature sets. So a sort of full-fledged comparative analysis could actually go a long way. Build it and they will come. Who believes this? 1 or 2? I've got some skeptical faces. No? Okay. I would love to hear why people don't think this is working. Yeah?
You could build the wrong thing.
You could build the wrong thing? Any other comment?
You could look at the hundreds of thousands of apps on Facebook and everybody just plays the Zynga games.
If you didn't hear that, you can look at the hundreds of apps on Facebook and everyone just plays the Zynga games. I'm guilty of that, totally. Anything else? One more.
How will anyone know about it?
How will anyone know about it? Right. I actually would say also firstly, who are they? Who are your users? How will they find out about you? Why would they come? I mean, would they have a reason? Why would they need what you're building? And why would they choose you over a competitor? These are all really, really good questions. There's a tool for that, and it's called the user matrices. Sorry about that. This is new, and I'm not used to it. At least I haven't blacked out the screen yet. Okay. So, Let me tell you a background story on user matrices. Early last year, I was running a design thinking workshop for a running shoe company. Just saying, any runners in this room? I'm curious. Do developers run? There's quite a few. I think that's actually statistically representative. So runners who like running. When you go to a different city, you know the problem. If you want to run, it's very difficult to know where to go, right? And so after sort of halfway through this workshop session I've been running, one of the participants said, well, wouldn't it be really cool if we built a tool that allow people to sort of know where they're running in a different city that they're visiting, whether for a conference or for whatever. And I said, well, okay, well, let's test this out. Let's apply to what we've been trying to learn. And a user matrix works like this. You think about certain attributes and just a straight brainstorm list of different attributes of the people you may be dealing with. Now, this is it was easy for us because they were running a shoe company. They sort of already know their users to a degree. And we wanted it to be social, right? And so you think, okay, the curious runner versus the engaged runner, the frequent versus the occasional, the person who likes exploring versus the one who's competitive. And so basically pick a list and find the opposite, and that's how you get your axes. And then you do a 3x3 grid. You notice that basically everything I've talked about so far, you just need a bit of a pencil and a paper. I've tried a 4x4 before, and it's just not worked really well, and I don't know why. And so I've always defaulted to about a 3x3. So you choose 2 key axes, and basically identify a question. So imagine it's like a magic 8-ball thing. So we decided that the important axes were local and visitor, because we're talking about if you go to a different city, what happens. And which is for fun, we decided to look at people who would like to just explore, or who are actually into competing with people they haven't met yet. And so what can they do with this particular application that we haven't really decided if it's mobile or if it's a website? What can they do? They can find new routes, they can set a record, they can stop other runners. And so we just brainstormed and just sat down and just hammered out a few of these matrices. And so after a while, you sort of notice a few things. It's quite common that on one column you see similar features on one side. So here you can see find new routes for anybody who's interested in exploring, and anyone who's competitive may be interested in setting a record. I would emphasize now that this is mostly conjecture, this is not research. User modeling is simply an idea of just figuring out what do we already know? What can we already make a guess, educated guess upon? And so through this exercise, you vary your axes, so change those sort of axes, and vary your questions, rinse and repeat. So I think we did 3 or 4 in just a matter of, again, less than an hour. And this is actually one of the whiteboards. Sort of by the third or the 4th one we realized something pretty crucial, which is very important if you're trying to create a minimum viable product. In this case, it's quite obvious that the people who know the routes to run are going to be local ones. They are the ones who will be filling the systems with information, and therefore they are the ones with the feature sets you probably first need to complete before even thinking about what happens to a visit to a city, even though that was our intention in the long run. So it is very, very simple to think, okay, here, the locals are the ones we absolutely need to target first, and we have to find a way to get them to see the information in the database before we get other people to come and say, hey, where can I run in the city? Right? And the other thing that sort of becomes apparent after a while when you do this drill, you sort of understand what the key question is. And here, I wish I knew where to run. Every single page or every single function of this app would have to be able to answer this question. I wish I knew where to run. And so this sort of stuff is very, very important, because the day when you have too many features, you need to sort of have a checklist against this. I wish I knew where to run. That is, the barometer for whether this thing is necessary or not. So, in summary, user modeling in matrices. Basically, it uncovers your underlying assumptions. We like to think of users as just one group of people, but they're really not. They come to us with different motivations and behavioral patterns. And so it's a way to uncover what we already know and what we don't know. So in that particular example, they've done some user research. They know what certain users are like. But we also figured out there's a lot we don't know, and therefore that would be the time to decide what kind of research we need to take to understand certain groups of users better than others, and therefore build a more effective app. One last tool, design principles. Again, really, really simple. It's synthesizing a core design requirements. So the one you've just seen before, I wish I knew where to run, would serve itself as a design principle. Although totally, this is an example, oops. My battery just died, oh yeah. Design principles are just written statements, generally speaking. They can be longer or shorter, but in this particular case, it was for a website that was an online grocery in San Francisco. They're finishing early, right? Okay. So it can be for product or a page. This particular one, it was a company that was very, very passionate about teaching people how to cook well, and it's like slow food principles behind them. As with sites like this, you don't want to overwhelm people with your gung-ho attitude or with certain things. And so we made sure in the design of the site that we allow people to peel back different layers, and so they encounter one mission statement and they can figure out what things mean. So this sort of stuff, in writing down key principles, would allow you to segment your information better and also define your interaction design. A sound user experience strategy is informed by research but conceived with conviction. Now, the thing with research is you can research anything you want, right? If you've got all the information in front of you, it's very easy to sort of establish what you think you want to know. The harder part is to find out what actually is what you need. And so this is why you need to balance against the business needs and the brand, the position you're coming with, the personality you're coming with in the conversation with the users. And common user research methods. Now, there's a lot to this, so much to this that I know I won't have time today, but if at 4 o'clock you want to talk about any of this, it would be a good time. They are general user testing tool follows along service axis. Now, there are probably other ways you can slice the pie, but this is one of my favorite ways. It's open-ended or closed-ended research methods. And open-ended are ones that are like open interviews, listening labs, or similar. Basically, you show up and listen to users and let them tell you their context. On the other side, closed-ended tools are like A/B testing. Remote testing tools where sometimes you can have screenshots of your application, you post them, and people give you feedback on what they remember. So like things like 5-second tests. You test, there's a few of them that you can use for remote testing. In the middle, you have things like traditional IA tools like card sorting, focus group, and usability testing. Now, don't worry if this is sort of like mumbo jumbo, if you've not encountered this before, because if you just search for it, you find a wealth of information that already exists. These tools have been around for a very long time. And again, if you want to talk about it more, catch me afterwards or during the break. Not surprisingly, the open-ended tools are good for exploring the problem space. So all the time we've been spending about framing a problem, if you need to know more about your users at this point, talking to them is really, unfortunately, the best thing to do. There is one missing thing on this chart, and I know that in several talks so far we've talked about analytics. My take is that you can have data-driven information on user behavior, and you find out that people do certain things and certain patterns come out. But until you talk to your users, you won't know why they're doing it, and you won't know where to take that information further as you're designing a product or an app. So this is why these tools are so very important, and as much data as you can possibly collect will not tell you why. Ooh, I just turned this off. There you go. So, in summary, the tools we've covered so far, all around business, brand, and user, and what makes hopefully a unique product. There are more, and you'll probably find them in your journeys. But I would say don't be afraid to experiment. Try these tools if you find yourself in the situation to be able to use them. And don't be afraid to try something a little different or tweak it based on the sort of team structure that you have. There are also very many right answers. Now, I know that it would be easy to say this is right and this is wrong, but there's never quite a right answer when it comes to human problems. And so it is okay when things don't work, it is okay when things fail, it is okay when the tool doesn't work, and it's okay when you get contradictory information. So all the tools we've talked about so far, I would say absorb, this is a Bruce Lee quote, absorb what is useful, discard what is not. And if you find that you can create new ways of doing it, by all means do. I'm sorry, you know that you can't see quite well. If you find things along the way that suits you better, by all means try them out. They'll work better for you for that reason. Be intentional. Take the time to think. I mean, all these tools that we've started to talk about today, unfortunately, they're not going to help you make a lot of money. They're not going to help you with a genius moment and whether you come up with that particular app, the killer app. But they should hopefully help you frame your problem better so that the kinds of solutions that you generate will be more relevant and more targeted to the people you think you want to reach. And with that, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, what? I've got time for questions. Any questions?
I've got a question. With the
Do you want to know?
That was great, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Stephanie, how do you know which competitive analysis matrices, like for the example you gave, you had curious versus engaged or social versus individual for the running out. Is that just a practical thing? How do you choose which ones to lay out on a grid? Is it just gut instinct or?
Sometimes it's gut instinct. So, for example, there's one that I end up always using. Like, imagine you're creating something that has a social element to it, like whether it's commenting, voting, whatever. You're going to have two types of users, pretty much, and you can imagine yourself, put yourself in your shoes. There's always the person who will dive in and just comment straight away and, without caring for what else has been said. I mean, we just have to look at YouTube for that kind of thing. On the other hand, you have people who lurk for a long time before they share a link. And imagine that. Now that would be one very, very key axis for any kind of application that has a social spin. The rest of it does come with understanding who you're trying to target. And it really depends. And I would just brainstorm it with a team or with a couple of people, or bring a user experience person into the room. Is that okay? Yeah. Pass the mic back.
What is heuristic evaluation?
Heuristic evaluation is also known as expert review. Basically, you get someone like me to look at your site and tell you what's wrong with it. There's some value to it. So, for example, if you want to do a redesign, for example, getting someone in to look at it first before you decide the course of action is always generally a good idea because experts have a fairly good idea of common mistakes that are being done. If you want to do a heuristic evaluation after you've done some changes, it probably doesn't make much sense. So it's just that, it's an expert review. Is that good? Yeah. Okay. Question right at the back. I need someone on this side of the room very soon. It's kind of like gravity is falling this way.
There are a lot of tools out there for soliciting customer feedback, like Get Satisfaction, User Voice, things like that. Are there any tools that you recommend that you've used that you can share?
That's a good one. I've used both Get Satisfaction and User Voice. This is quite a few years ago, and at the time I actually chose User Voice over Get Satisfaction because there was a login thing where I found that people were not keen on leaving comments if they have to do another login on top of your system, let's say if you're not paying for that, which is actually quite a hefty price when you're a startup. Then again, does anyone remember that site where you document your journeys? Doppler? Does anyone remember Doppler? So I guess it's maybe an old site by now. This particular site just has an open feedback box that goes into somewhere mysterious that you don't know about, but at least you can write feedback. That also works.
It does get ignored though.
Sorry?
It does get ignored.
It does get ignored? Okay, someone from the inside then.
Not really.
Okay. Sorry, I don't actually have a real recommendation, but I think it's just a matter of trying out and deciding.
And I guess with that said, how do you balance kind of the competitive side and the business side versus soliciting customer feedback? Because a lot of those applications, everything's just out there, so you can go to your competitor sites and see what people are saying, and say, oh, they're going to launch this feature next. They're telling everyone they're going to launch it. So,
like I was trying to say, competing by feature is only one factor. Why do I suddenly sound with I have an American R going on here? I think what would be more important is understanding, like I said, your goals, the impact you're trying to have. And even if user complaints come in, but don't sort of fit that vision that you have, you be aware that you're not going to address them. And don't let that distract you from what you're trying to achieve. Because if you allow too many factors to cloud your judgment, you're not going to know what to test, and you're not going to know whether your app is going to work or not. So I would approach this very much like a scientific experiment. Understanding what your hypothesis is, what are you trying to test, what are you trying to find out whether it works or not, and be very, very clear about it. Understand the methods you're using to measure, and then figuring out whether the results actually tell you what you want to know, or whether it's a failed test. So you could approach design quite scientifically. I don't know. Maybe towards the back. I think you were first.
who's that?
Sorry. The person with their hand up on the sort of forefront in the back.
A lot of what you've been talking about seems to overlap with product management.
Absolutely.
But also it sort of drifts into design and developer phases and things like that. So I'm just wondering, in your organisation, who takes the responsibility to actually, in a development process, say, we need this, and who takes the responsibility to actually see it through? Because I can kind of see scenarios where everyone says, hey, we need this, but because everyone's so busy coding or doing their own jobs, that it just kind of gets forgotten.
Ooh, that's a difficult question. It depends, perhaps.
But in your case, for example, is there someone employed to have this kind of role, or is it more?
I'm a consultant, so I'm sort of an oddball in the situation, but the main project I'm working on, we would have, I think the decision is made in a consensual way, more or less, of course, with the boss having the final say what goes and what does not go. But it's very easy for us to think that development shouldn't own product management, but in my experience, certainly in the last 12 years, the developer has a place in discussing product direction, mostly because we're the ones who sort of keep track of what's going on out there. We know what's cool right now, even though we probably are not always keen on meeting it. So I think that there is room for discussion at the product management table, and there always should be, if that sort of answers your question. But I do think that the person who says, okay, well, that's a business decision, should probably make the final call, and because otherwise you probably want to do sort of a risk assessment to decide, is this weird thing that we're going to try, is it worth the money we're spending? As scary as that sounds. There was two other, sorry, go on. One more? Okay. There were two hands up this side and one here. I'll let you pick. Okay, how about that gentleman on that side, just because I want to make you walk around the room. There you go. Thank you.
Hi, thanks.
Hello.
That was a great introduction to side of.
We call it UX strategy.
Okay. To something that I don't really deal with in my day-to-day job as a developer, although I've come across it a little bit in kind of hack days and things like that. I was just wondering if I could look it up myself, but is there any kind of resources or places to go to kind of pick this stuff up, or books? You mentioned some valuable book at the start.
Oh, gosh.
What was invaluable?
There is one book, which I'm horrible at remembering book titles, but if you catch me later, I'll try to find out for you. There is one book in particular that I refer to because it's actually more about incorporating UX into project management, oddly enough, but it has sort of the best summary of things like user research and tools, and I've used it extensively in my own work. that's probably the best resource that sort of gives you things on UX in general. But for, I mean, there are particular books on prototyping, there are particular books on mobile design now that wouldn't be very hard to find if you just do a quick search.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Are we out of time? Thank you so much for coming today. This was as new for you as it was for me.